Welcome to part 6 of the 3D animation in Maya. This tutorial will serve as sort of a summative assessment on everything we've learned so far about navigating the interface and using our transformation tools. So let's start right where we left off. If you don't have anything in your scene, just add any piece of geometry. It doesn't have to be a torus. And don't forget your transformation tool keyboard shortcuts. Remember W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. We're going to be using them a lot from now on, so I don't want you to depend on clicking the buttons on the side of the screen. Remember that you could also select objects by clicking on them with any of the transformation tools active, or by clicking and dragging a selection box that touches the object. Let's go into our 4-view layout by pressing the spacebar. Now, my object here is a bit transparent, and it's not supposed to be that way by default, especially in shaded view. If your object looks similar to what you're seeing on my screen, we're gonna just do a quick fix now. If your object does not look like this and it looks normal, you can skip this part. It's a very quick fix. All you need to do is click on the X-ray button in the viewport menu. Now, the viewport menu has so many different buttons and they're all very, very small. To make sure that you don't click the wrong button, hover the mouse over the icon so that it says X-ray, and once you're on the right button, you can click on it. This icon looks like 2 overlapping squares. So once you click on it, now you can see that my object looks normal. So I'm just going to do the same thing in the other views for sanity's sake. Let's try moving our object in perspective view. Notice how in the other views, the object has moved automatically to update the changes that we've made. We can also manipulate the object in any view using any of the transformation tools. So right now, we're just messing around with the tools to get our hands wet and to get more acquainted with the transformation tools. You do not need to follow this tutorial to the T. I just realized that tutorial starts with T. Notice how all the values in the channel box have changed after our many transformations. So remember the method for changing multiple values? Click and drag down from the top of Translate X to Scale Z, and we're going to type in 0 to restore our object to its default values, and press enter after that. Whoa, what just happened to our object?
My question is, what the hell?
What is happening?
That's because the object scale by default is not set to 0, it's actually set to a value of 1. So if any time your object's scale is set to 0, this will basically make the object non-existent. So it's going to be invisible. Let's fix this. I'm going to click on scale X, Y, and Z and change the value to 1. And now our object is back.
Magic.
Now you might be asking yourself, what is this visibility attribute, which we haven't talked about yet? The visibility attribute toggles the object's visibility. Whoa, really?
Well, now we have a firm grasp of the obvious.
Typing in a value of 0 here will change the visibility to off. If you type in a value of 1, the object will reappear. Let's head over to the outliner for a second. Remember that the outliner shows us absolutely everything in our scene. So even if an object is hidden in the viewport, we can actually still see it in the outliner. However, notice how the text of our object is a dark gray color. So that actually means that it's hidden. If it's visible, the text will be white. Okay, so in the channel box, I'm going to type in a value of 1 beside the visibility attribute. And we can see that our object is back in the viewport. You don't have to spell out the word off or on. This is actually a binary function in Maya, which means it only operates on 1s and 0s. So 1 is on and 0 will be off. So here's a faster way of hiding an object. Just select the object you want to hide first and then press Ctrl H. Control is found to the left of the Option key on a Mac keyboard. For some reason, Apple loves to make things complicated, and if we press Command H, we will actually hide the entire application of Maya. Let's try another method of unhiding the object. So I'm going to click on its name in the outliner, and then I'm going to press Shift and H, and that will unhide the object and make it visible again. I'm going to add some geometry to serve as a kind of ground plane. I'm going to click on the diamond shape in the poly modeling shelf, and that will create a plane for me. Unlike other 3D shapes, a plane is actually a 2-dimensional object. And I'm just going to scale this up to about the same size as the grid lines in the viewport. Remember to scale from the center of the gimbal using the yellow cube, so that will scale the plane evenly. Now always check to see if an object is penetrating through other geometry. So in this case, our torus is actually going through the ground. If it is, just simply move it up. It's okay if a small portion of the object is going through the ground, because you always want to have a little bit of contact between two pieces of geometry. Otherwise they'll be floating, and we don't want that. This will be more important when we start rendering our scenes so that we get accurate shadows. So in this next part, I'm just adding in a sphere and positioning it inside the torus, but you can add anything you like. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the outside edges of the sphere. Why do you think they're kind of jagged here? If you guessed subdivisions, you are right. Give yourself a pat on the back. Now, instead of increasing the amount of subdivisions on our sphere, I'll actually show you a quick workaround of making our object smooth so that it appears that it has many subdivisions. If you press the 1 key, it'll display the object in its normal unsmoothened form. The 2 key will display a smoothened object with its unsmoothened wireframe. So right now I'm seeing sort of a combination between the smoothened sphere, but also the original wireframe of the sphere. Let's do the same thing for the torus here. If I press the 3 key, it'll remove the wireframe cage and show us just the smooth preview of the object. So this is actually a cool way of making an object appear smooth while still maintaining its poly count, or its number of subdivisions. But keep in mind that smooth mode is only visible in the viewport and not the final render. So if I render the scene, I'm still going to see those jagged edges, and the only way to get around that is by increasing the subdivisions. For now, since we're not rendering, we're fine with just viewing the objects in smooth mode. I'm going to press 1, bring the objects back to their default resolution, and now here I'm just adding in some more geometry and positioning it in my scene. Again, feel free to add anything you like. One of my favorite shapes is a helix. This tool is not visible in the shelf by default, so we can add it in from the toolbar, create menu, polygon primitives, and helix. Okay, so you can see that even after I've added in my helix, it's not really visible. Or is it? What kind of tricks is Maya playing on me?
Get out of my head.
Alright, don't worry. The object is there. But since we've already crowded the scene with geometry, every time you add an object, it gets added into the center of our grid by default. And since we haven't moved our geometry around away from the center of the grid, everything's kind of piling on top of each other. So our helix is there, it's just underneath everything. And if I press the 4 key and go into wireframe mode, I can see that my helix is there, and it's light green, so that means it's currently selected. Now, if you're happy with where your objects are placed, and you don't want to move them out of the way, we can actually access the helix from the outliner. So I'm selecting helix here, then I have my move tool, and now I can simply move it out of the way. There it is. So the helix looks like a coil or a spring kind of shape, and there are actually a bunch of parameters that we can change in the channel box to tweak the shape of the helix. Let's tweak this just for fun. Remember that these parameters are found under the input section of the channel box. So we have to click on Poly Helix 1, and then underneath that we'll see our hidden attributes. So take a few minutes to experiment with these different parameters to see how it affects the shape of the helix. That's pretty much it for this tutorial. In the next video, we're actually going to start prepping our scene for animating a bouncing ball. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.